So, if you break your arm, you get an X-ray, and it gives you this very comforting binary answer.
Right. Broken or not broken.
Exactly. You see the jagged white line, the doctor points to it, you know exactly what you're dealing with.
Yeah, it's highly definitive.
But cancer isn't a broken bone. I mean, it isn't even a disease in the traditional, mechanical sense.
No, not all.
It's actually a billion-year-old evolutionary rebellion, and it's happening right now inside the human body.
It's happening constantly, yeah.
So today, our mission for this deep dive is to basically completely unlearn and rebuild what you think you know about this phenomenon.
Which is a big task, but we have an incredible stack of sources to get us there.
We really do. We're pulling from medical genetics, evolutionary biology, and cellular ecology.
Because we really have to abandon the entire paradigm of cancer as just a singular malfunction with a singular cure.
Right.
To really understand what we're looking at, you have to view the tumor as a highly complex, fiercely competitive ecosystem.
Which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
We're going to explore why elephants are, the ultimate cancer fighters, and why the version of genetic testing you see on those procedural crime shows is a total myth.
Oh, the CSI effect. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. And we'll get into how these cells are essentially ancient evolutionary cheaters.
Basically, yeah.
But to get there, I feel like we have to start with the raw material of evolution itself, right? The DNA mutations.
We do. That's the foundation.
Because, people swab their cheek, they mail it to a lab, and they just assume some glowing screen is going to tell them definitively if they, quote-unquote, have the cancer gene.
Right. But that completely misunderstands how this biology actually operates.
How so?
Well, that procedural TV trope entirely ignores the fundamental difference between germline and somatic mutations.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. So when people talk about inheriting a cancer gene, they usually mean germline mutations.
Meaning it's in the family line.
Exactly. These are present in the reproductive cells, so the sperm or the egg, which means they are copied into every single cell of your body right from conception.
Okay.
A mutated BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene is, the classic example of this.
Right. So if we think of DNA as the operating system for the human body.
I like that analogy.
A germline mutation is sort of like a flaw in the original source code that just gets pushed to every single device on the network.
Yes, exactly. Every cell has that underlying vulnerability built right in.
But our sources point out that germline mutations actually account for a tiny minority of cases, right?
Very tiny, yeah. The vast majority are actually driven by somatic mutations.
Okay, so following the software analogy, a somatic mutation would be more like a localized glitch that develops in one specific app on one specific device after, years of continuous uptime.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. Somatic mutations are acquired over your lifetime, and they are localized entirely to the tumor tissue itself.
So it's not systemic from birth.
No, not at all. You can't pass a somatic KRAS or HER2/neu mutation to your children because it simply isn't in your reproductive cells.
Got it.
The reality of living biology is that your cells are just constantly accumulating these localized glitches.
Because the DNA is under attack, right?
Unceasing assault. I mean, absolute unceasing assault from both endogenous and exogenous sources.
Which is terrifying. Just the act of staying alive causes damage. As our cells metabolize energy, they generate these reactive oxygen species.
Yeah, and these reactive oxygen species, they act like molecular wrecking balls.
Wow.
They're these highly unstable molecules that are desperately seeking electrons, and they will literally rip those electrons right out of your DNA's sugar-phosphate backbone.
Just tearing it apart.
Literally severing the strands. And that is just the internal cost of respiration. That's just breathing and metabolizing.
And then you add the exogenous assault stuff from the outside.
Right, like ultraviolet radiation from the sun.
Which people think just gives you a sunburn.
Right, but it doesn't just broadly damage cells. It actually has a very specific mechanism. When UV photons strike your DNA, they can cause adjacent thymine bases to covalently bond to each other.
Okay, wait, what does that mean practically?
It creates something called a thymine dimer.
Which physically distorts the double helix structure, right? It creates an actual kink in the molecular track.
Exactly, a physical bulge in the DNA. And then you add chemical carcinogens on top of that.
Like the heavy tar compounds in cigarette smoke.
Yes, which attach these massive, bulky adducts directly to the DNA. They completely block the cell's replication machinery.
Honestly, hearing all this, it seems impossible that we survive a single afternoon at the beach, let alone, decades of continuous cellular division.
It is amazing, isn't it? But we survive because our cells deploy these incredibly sophisticated enzymatic repair crews.
Right, they have their own maintenance teams.
And they don't just randomly guess where the damage is either. They physically scan the architecture of the genome.
Like cracking along a zipper or something.
Yeah, proteins track along the DNA backbone, literally feeling for electrostatic changes or those physical bulges we talked about.
That is mind-blowing.
It is. For small, non-distorting lesions, you have base excision repair enzymes. They act like tiny molecular tweezers, plucking at the oxidized base and patching it.
Okay, so that's for the small stuff. What about the big UV kinks?
When they detect that massive structural bulge of a UV-induced thymine dimer, nucleotide excision repair kicks in.
And that's more drastic.
Yeah, this pathway uses molecular scissors to excise a long stretch of the damaged strand, forcing the cell to just synthesize a completely fresh sequence.
And for the really catastrophic stuff,
Mhm.
like the double-strand breaks where the whole helix is just severed.
That's when you have heavy-duty emergency protocols, things like non-homologous end joining.
Which sounds intense.
It is. It's
Yeah.
basically just desperately trying to glue the broken ends back together before the cell's instruction manual degrades entirely.
Which makes sense. But, it feels like a heavily mutated cell should just die from the sheer trauma of that structural failure.
Logically, yes.
So the fact that it survives and actually aggressively multiplies implies it's tapping into something else, like a very old, very hidden survival program.
Yes. What's fascinating here is the precise tipping point where that repair fails and the hidden program activates.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does it activate?
Well, this hinges on genes that regulate the cell cycle, most notably tumor suppressors like TP53.
The famous TP53.
Right. When DNA damage is detected, TP53 normally halts cell division to allow for repair.
Like pulling the emergency brake.
Exactly. And if the damage is beyond fixing, it initiates apoptosis, which is programmed cell death.
It tells the cell to fall on its sword for the greater good.
Yes. But if a mutagen specifically knocks out that TP53 gene itself,
Oh, I see.
yeah, the internal alarm system is just silenced. The heavily damaged cell just continues to replicate, passing its shattered genome to the next generation and laying the foundation for a tumor.
So we're looking at a cell that has completely lost its safety switches. But to understand why it suddenly prioritizes relentless expansion over the health of the host, we really have to look back, about 600 million years?
Roughly, yeah. Back to the origins of multicellular life.
Because, okay, imagine a healthy human body as this highly cooperative utopian society. You've got trillions of citizens willingly sacrificing their own ability to reproduce infinitely, all for the greater good of the organism.
Right, the skin cells form a barrier, the muscle cells contract, they all play by the rules.
Exactly. So cancer, in this analogy, is a biological citizen deciding to stop paying taxes, ignore all the zoning laws, and aggressively hoard resources.
That's a perfect way to put it. Evolutionary biologists actually term this behavior atavism.
Atavism, meaning an evolutionary reversion.
Yes. Prior to 600 million years ago, life on Earth was almost entirely unicellular. A single cell was shaped by natural selection to maximize its own immediate replication and survival.
That was its only job.
That was the only goal. But to make the immense leap to multicellular organisms, those single cells had to enter into a strict biological social contract.
They had to give something up.
They had to suppress their ancient defining drive to endlessly divide.
So cancer isn't some alien invader we catch. It's a localized amnesia.
I love that phrase.
The cell just forgets the social contract and remembers its deep ancestral past, reverting to that selfish, unicellular lifestyle.
And it becomes entirely blind to the molecular rules of social restraint. And the genomic evidence for this is incredibly compelling, too.
What do the genomes show us?
Well, when we track the evolutionary history of the tumor suppressor genes that we rely on to prevent cancer,
Like TP53.
right, we see that many of them first appeared in the fossil record at the exact same time as the emergence of multicellularity.
No way.
Yeah. They evolved for the express purpose of keeping those selfish, ancient impulses in check so that complex, cooperative bodies could even exist.
Wow, so the human body is basically holding back a 600-million-year-old instinct every single second of the day.
Every second.
But wait, if these rogue cells are fundamentally selfish and they've reverted to this cutthroat, every cell for itself mentality, they shouldn't be able to build something as robust as a tumor. Right?
I think so.
Like, shouldn't they just destroy each other fighting for local resources before the tumor ever becomes a real threat?
That paradox is actually right at the forefront of modern cancer ecology. See, once that rogue cell starts dividing, it generates what we call intratumor heterogeneity.
Meaning the tumor isn't just one type of cell.
Exactly. The tumor is not a monolithic clone of one bad cell. It is a wildly diverse, rapidly evolving population of competitors.
Okay.
As these cells divide, their compromised genomes acquire new mutations. Many of those variations are lethal to the cell itself, but some grant a distinct survival advantage.
So they were undergoing somatic evolution in real time.
Real-time evolution, yes.
They're experiencing punctuated equilibrium, where just a single advantageous mutation causes a rapid burst of clonal expansion.
That's exactly it. But they don't just compete with each other, they manipulate the surrounding tissue.
Because a rogue cell can't build a complex tumor infrastructure entirely on its own, right?
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the cancer cells are actively engineering their microenvironment.
How do they do that?
They secrete cytokines and growth factors to essentially hijack neighboring healthy fibroblasts, turning them into cancer-associated fibroblasts.
Wait, so they can script healthy cells to do their dirty work?
Exactly. These hijacked healthy cells essentially become helpers at the nest. They construct the physical collagen scaffolding that the tumor needs to grow.
Which sounds very much like cooperative breeding dynamics in animal populations.
It's very similar biologically, yeah.
And our sources highlight that this manipulation extends way beyond our own human cells. Like, look at the microbiome, specifically in the GI tract.
Oh, this is a fascinating area.
Because you've got trillions of bacteria down there pursuing their own evolutionary agendas.
Right.
And in a condition like Barrett's esophagus, certain microbial populations actually chemically manipulate the human host cells.
Yeah, they force them to construct larger mucus-producing niches called crypts.
So the microbes are simply modifying the environment to build a more hospitable home for themselves.
Exactly. They're just making a nice, cozy environment. But by forcing the host tissue to constantly remodel and proliferate, they dramatically increase the cellular turnover rate.
Which inadvertently increases the host's susceptibility to oncogenic mutations.
Exactly. It's a complex, multi-species interaction that actually drives the pathology.
Basically, the microbes are renovating the house, and in the process, they accidentally tear down the load-bearing walls that prevent cancer.
That's a great analogy. But this aggressive, selfish expansion inevitably hits a physical limit, too.
Right, because the tumor population eventually outgrows its blood supply.
Yes. They engineer their own tragedy of the commons. By maximizing their individual replication, the cancer cells rapidly deplete all the local glucose and oxygen.
So the environment collapses.
The core of the tumor becomes incredibly harsh, very acidic, and hypoxic, meaning devoid of oxygen. The carrying capacity of the local environment just plummets.
And under that intense selective pressure, only the most resilient survive.
Only the cells that evolve motility, the ability to physically detach and move.
So they enter the bloodstream to colonize distant, resource-rich tissues.
Exactly.
Which means metastasis isn't just an arbitrary stage of the disease. It's an ecological migration driven by a self-imposed famine.
Yes, and that completely reframes the entire lethality of cancer.
It really does. But it also forces us to ask, if cancer is this aggressive, fast-evolving ecosystem, how do massive organisms survive at all?
It's a great question.
Because if every cell division is like a spin in the evolutionary roulette wheel, organisms with more cells should logically get more cancer.
Right.
Which brings us to elephants. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Ah, yes. This is the crux of Peto's paradox.
Right, because an elephant has millions of times more cells than a mouse.
Millions. And they live decades longer. By pure statistical probability, an elephant should just be riddled with tumors by the time it reaches adolescence.
But they aren't. Their cancer rates are remarkably low.
Very low, because evolution at the organism level had to solve the problem of somatic evolution at the cellular level.
In order for a massive, long-lived organism to even exist, it had to simultaneously evolve an incredibly robust defense mechanism against those rogue cells.
Exactly. As bodies scaled up in size, cancer suppression became a primary evolutionary bottleneck.
So what did the elephants do?
Well, genomic analysis reveals that elephants evolved multiple extra copies of crucial tumor suppressor genes,
Like PP53.
specifically TP53. When a human cell suffers severe DNA damage, it has one set of TP53 instructions to rely on. Elephants have dozens.
Dozens?
Yeah. Their threshold for triggering apoptosis in damaged cells is incredibly sensitive. It essentially clears out potential threats before they ever have the chance to initiate that ancient unicellular rebellion.
Okay, but within our own species, the math still applies, doesn't it?
It does, actually.
Like taller humans inherently have more cells and undergo more cell divisions. And the epidemiological data shows a relative risk increase of about 1.14 for women per 10 centimeters of height.
Right, which proves the rule. But across different species, evolution levels the playing field by drastically upgrading the tumor suppression hardware in larger animals.
This raises an important question, though. Understanding that the tumor is a highly evolved, internally competitive ecosystem, how does that change treatment?
It fundamentally challenges how we approach it. I mean, the standard protocol for decades has been the maximum tolerated dose of chemotherapy.
Which, if we look at it ecologically, is basically equivalent to crop dusting a massive amount of pesticide over a diverse field.
That's exactly what it is.
It kills a massive volume of cells, but it inadvertently engineers a supertumor. Because if a tumor is heterogeneous, there are almost certainly a small fraction of cells that possess a natural resistance to the chemical agent.
And that's the danger. When you deploy maximum dose chemotherapy, you absolutely decimate the sensitive cancer cells.
But by doing so...
By doing so, you wipe out all the competition for those few resistant cells.
Wow.
This is a phenomenon known as competitive release. You leave the resistant mutants with an empty ecological niche, abundant oxygen, and zero competitors.
So they just rapidly conquer the newly available space.
Yes, leading to a relapse that is entirely drug-resistant and exponentially more aggressive.
It's the exact same evolutionary pressure that creates antibiotic-resistant superbugs.
It's the exact same biological math.
So if blasting the tumor with maximum toxicity just breeds unstoppable variants, we need a way to, manage the ecosystem instead of trying to completely eradicate it.
Precisely. We need to keep the weak cells around on purpose.
To crowd out the strong ones.
Exactly. That concept is formalized in clinical research right now as adaptive therapy.
Okay, how does that work?
Instead of aiming for total eradication, oncologists conditionally apply much lower modulated doses of chemotherapy.
Okay.
The explicit biological goal is to reduce the tumor burden while intentionally maintaining a robust population of sensitive cells.
Because those sensitive cells continue to consume the local glucose and oxygen.
Yes, they physically occupy the space. They keep the environment near its carrying capacity, which starves and suppresses the dangerous resistant mutants.
So you are utilizing the tumor's own internal ecological competition as a therapeutic tool.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It shifts the paradigm from a futile attempt at a definitive cure, which, as we said, often accelerates the lethality of the disease, to long-term strategic management.
You constrain the tumor by basically playing the rules of evolutionary biology against it, which significantly extends the patient's survival.
Exactly.
The logic is undeniable once you view the body through an evolutionary lens, but this exposes a massive contradiction that we really have to address.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if evolution is constantly trying to keep us alive to pass on our genes, and natural selection is powerful enough to give elephants dozens of extra cancer-fighting genes,
Right.
why are we left with this seemingly glaring design flaw?
Right. Why didn't human evolution just eradicate our vulnerability to cancer entirely?
Yeah, why didn't it?
To answer that, we rely on the framework of evolutionary medicine. The thing is, natural selection does not engineer perfect biological machines.
It doesn't.
No, it operates entirely on trade-offs. The human body is optimized for reproductive success in a specific ancestral environment. It is not optimized for lifelong, disease-free health.
So every biological advantage comes with a hidden cost.
Always. One of the most fascinating trade-offs in the literature is how our essential capacity for wound healing is intrinsically linked to our vulnerability to cancer.
How so?
Well, in the ancestral environment, surviving a physical trauma, say a predator attack or a severe laceration, required an immediate, explosive cellular response.
You needed to heal faster, you died.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The body needed cells capable of rapid proliferation, high motility to migrate to the wound site, and the capacity for rapid angiogenesis.
Angiogenesis being the formation of new blood vessels, right? To deliver oxygen and nutrients to the repairing tissue.
Right.
But wait, rapid proliferation, tissue invasion, and angiogenesis. Those are the exact mechanisms a rogue cell uses to build a tumor and orchestrate metastasis.
You see it now. The biological pathways that allow us to heal a severed artery in childhood are the exact same pathways that leave the back door open for somatic evolution later in life.
That is wild.
It's a trade-off. Natural selection heavily favors traits that ensure survival to reproductive age. It fundamentally prioritizes passing on genetic material over the long-term maintenance of the organism.
This sounds like that concept, antagonistic pleiotropy, where traits that give a reproductive advantage early in life are selected for, even if they cause devastating disease later on.
That's exactly what it is. For example, high testosterone levels provide a competitive mating advantage for males.
Right.
But that prolonged cellular stimulation is strongly correlated with an increased risk of prostate cancer later in life.
And I'd imagine the exact same hormonal trade-offs apply to female reproductive health, too.
They absolutely do. Evolutionary pressures that led to earlier menarche and a higher number of lifetime reproductive cycles. They certainly maximize immediate reproductive potential.
But they simultaneously subject breast and ovarian tissues to decades of intense estrogen and progesterone exposure.
Which dramatically increases the lifetime risk of oncogenic mutation.
Because the body's biological imperative is to secure genetic continuation now, regardless of the physiological cost when you're 60.
Exactly. Which leads directly to perhaps the most pervasive driver of modern cancer rates, evolutionary mismatch.
The idea that our modern world doesn't match our ancient bodies.
Right. We are navigating a highly industrialized modern environment in bodies running on Stone Age genetics.
Like our lungs, for example. They evolved over hundreds of millions of years to extract oxygen from clean atmospheric air.
Yes.
So the cellular architecture of the human respiratory system was entirely unprepared for, the 20th century commercialization of cigarettes.
Right. Which systematically bombards those delicate tissues with hot, aerosolized carcinogens. Evolution couldn't have prepared us for that.
And we see the same mismatch with skin pigmentation, right?
We do. Melanin levels evolved in specific geographic regions to strike a very delicate balance. It was between protecting the DNA from UV radiation and allowing enough sunlight penetration to synthesize vitamin D.
But now, modern transportation allows millions of people to migrate to equatorial environments that are drastically mismatched to their genetic UV protection.
Exactly, resulting in the current epidemic of melanoma. And finally, our sheer longevity is a mismatch.
Because we live so much longer now.
Right. Modern sanitation and medicine allow us to routinely live into our 80s. But natural selection's filtering power drops to nearly zero after our reproductive years.
So our aging genomes are essentially just coasting on biological inertia.
Coasting and accumulating errors, with no evolutionary pressure to fix them.
Wow. We started this deep dive with a mission to dismantle the mechanical, purely diagnostic view of cancer. It is clearly not just a localized malfunction or a simple genetic switch.
Not at all. It is an ancient 600-million-year-old survival program waking up inside our bodies.
It's a dynamic, highly competitive ecosystem governed by the brutal rules of somatic evolution.
And it highlights the profound, deeply compromised trade-offs natural selection forced upon our biology just to ensure our species survived long enough to reproduce.
Shifting to this evolutionary perspective does something incredibly important. It demystifies a terrifying subject.
It really does.
It stops being a narrative of a hopeless battle against an invincible, unpredictable monster. It becomes a rational, biological puzzle. And through approaches like adaptive therapy, it's a puzzle we are actively learning to outsmart by weaponizing the tumor's own evolutionary drive against it.
It moves the scientific frontier from brute force eradication to sophisticated ecological management.
Which is so much more hope.
It is. And building on this concept of evolutionary mismatch, consider the trajectory of our species for a second.
Okay.
We discussed how modern terrestrial lifestyles, industrial chemicals, global migration, prolonged lifespans created a massive mismatch with our Stone Age genetics.
Right.
Well, consider what happens when humans inevitably become a multiplanetary species.
Oh, wow.
When we establish colonies on Mars or transit deep space, we are going to subject our biology to intense, unshielded cosmic radiation and prolonged microgravity.
The ultimate evolutionary mismatch.
Exactly. Will those radically novel, deeply hostile environments trigger completely unprecedented forms of cellular rebellion?
Or, over thousands of generations under that extreme selective pressure, will human evolution be forced to adapt?
Ultimately engineering spacefaring descendants with the intense, hypervigilant tumor suppression of an elephant.
Space elephant.
Space elephant.
That is a wild, paradigm-shifting thought to leave you with, and proof that this billion-year-old evolutionary battle is just moving to a new frontier. The X-ray machine might never capture the full depth of this biological ecosystem, but the landscape is finally starting to make sense. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the consensus, keep looking at the bigger picture, and we will catch you next time.